The rain beat against the windows of the old house as if it wanted to come in, as if it knew that someone inside needed company. Helena sat before the time-stained mirror, wearing the white dress her mother had worn decades before, now yellowed at the edges, with a mothball smell that no perfume could mask. Her fingers trembled as she tried to tie her brown hair into a bun that never stayed the way she wanted it, that never stayed the way anything she wanted it to. She was 23 years old and had the feeling that she had already lived a whole life of waiting. Waiting for the love of a father who left too soon. Waiting for the approval of a mother who never looked at her without comparing her to others. Waiting for a destiny different from the one that now presented itself before her like a sentence. The wedding was in 2 hours. The groom was a man she had only seen 3 times in her life. The first time was on a Sunday afternoon, when he appeared at the farm to negotiate the purchase of land with his uncle Augusto. Helena was in the yard, hanging clothes on the line, and he passed by her without even turning his face. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a closed expression that seemed sculpted from stone. He wore dark clothes, even under the strong sun, and there was something in his walk that suggested a man accustomed to being obeyed. The second time was when her uncle called her into the room and announced, as if commenting on the weather, that she would marry Rafael Montenegro in 3 months. Helena felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She looked to her mother for help, but received only a discreet nod of approval. Her mother had always known that Helena wasn't pretty enough to win a husband on her own, nor rich enough to have choices, nor talented enough to forge a different path. Marriage to a wealthy man was, according to her, the greatest luck Helena could have. The third time was at the engagement dinner, where Raphael spoke only 8 words to her all night. "Are you okay?" at the beginning, and "see you at the wedding" at the end. Between those words there was a chasm of silence that Helena tried to fill with nervous smiles, which he did not return. Now, standing before the mirror, she wondered what kind of life awaited her alongside a stranger. She only knew what others told her, that Rafael Montenegro had lost his first wife 5 years ago, that since then he had lived alone in the large stone house on the hilltop, that he managed his lands with an iron fist and rarely smiled, that some called him the ice widower, others a cursed man. There were rumors about the death of his first wife. Some said she had thrown herself from the terrace on a stormy night. Others whispered that the marriage had been so unhappy that she simply withered away until nothing was left. Helena didn't know what was true, but she knew it was too late to ask now. The bedroom door opened and her mother entered without knocking, as she always did, as if Helena didn't deserve the courtesy of a warning. She carried in her hands an old veil, the same one that had covered her own face decades ago. "Stop crying," said her mother, although Helena wasn't crying. Perhaps she could see the tears that hadn't yet fallen, those that had accumulated inside like dammed water. "You should be grateful. How many women in your situation would have an opportunity like this?" Helena wanted to ask what that situation was like. To be an orphan? To be considered the least beautiful daughter? To be treated her whole life as a burden that needed to be passed on? But she didn't ask. She had learned early on that her questions never had answers that made her feel better. "He's a good man," the mother continued, adjusting the veil over her daughter's hair with abrupt movements. "He has land, he has money, he has a name. What more could you want?" Love, Helena thought. She wanted love. She wanted someone who would look at her and truly see her. Not as a solution to a problem, not as a piece in a deal, not as a second option when the first was no longer available. She wanted someone to choose to stay, not because they needed to, but because they wanted to. But this desire was so absurd, so improbable, that she kept it in the same place where she kept her other impossible dreams, in a dark corner of her chest where no one could find and mock her. The ceremony took place in a small church, with dark wooden pews and stained glass windows that filtered the gray light of the rainy afternoon. There were few people present, mostly distant relatives and acquaintances who came more out of curiosity than affection. Helena walked down the aisle alone, since there was no father to give her away, and felt each step as if she were walking towards a precipice. Raphael awaited her at the altar with the same expression he had used in all their previous encounters. Distant, impenetrable, like a man fulfilling an obligation and nothing more. When Helena stopped beside him, he didn't look at her. He kept his eyes fixed on the priest, on the words that sealed a destiny neither of them had chosen. The vows were pronounced in mechanical voices. Helena's "yes" came out as a whisper, and she wondered if anyone besides her noticed how heavy that word was on her tongue. Raphael's "yes" was firm, almost impatient, as if he wanted to get it all over with quickly. When the priest announced they could kiss, Raphael leaned in and touched her lips for less than a second, a kiss so brief and cold that Helena felt as if she had been marked with ice. Then he offered her his arm to accompany him to the church exit, and Helena realized it was the first time he had truly touched her. The carriage that took them to the stone house on the hilltop crossed dirt roads soaked by the rain. Helena looked out the window, watching the landscape pass by like a blur of green and gray, and Raphael remained silent on the other side, as far away as it was possible to be within that confined space. She wanted to say something. Anything to break the silence that seemed to swallow all the available air. But she couldn't find the words, and he didn't seem interested in hearing any. The house loomed on the horizon like a sentence. It was large, larger than Helena had imagined, with dark stone walls and windows that seemed like eyes watching her approach. There was an austere beauty to the building, but also something that made her want to retreat, a coldness that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The servants were lined up at the entrance to greet her. A gray-haired housekeeper named Donna Marta gave a brief bow and led her inside, showing her the rooms with professional efficiency, the living room with its unlit fireplace, the library with books that looked like they had never been opened, the dining room with a table that was too long for two people. Raphael disappeared as soon as they entered, muttering something about urgent matters, and Helena was left alone to explore that house, which was now hers, but which didn't seem to want her there. The room assigned to her was on the second floor, with a window overlooking the abandoned gardens. It was a pretty room, with dark wood furniture and blue velvet curtains, but a layer of dust on the surfaces suggested that no one had been there for a long time. Helena sat on the edge of the bed and looked around, trying to find any trace of who had slept there before. He found nothing. Not a portrait, not a personal object, not even a mark on the wallpaper to indicate where a painting had once hung. It was as if the room had been emptied of all memory, deliberately left empty for the next occupant. The next occupant was her. The second wife? The replacement. Dinner was served at 7 o'clock sharp, at the large dining room table where Helena and Raphael sat at opposite ends, separated by meters of polished wood and years of ignorance. The servants came and went in silence, serving dishes that Helena could barely swallow. Each bite seemed to require immense effort, as if her body were protesting against this charade of normality. Raphael ate with the same efficiency with which he seemed to do everything, without apparent pleasure, merely fulfilling a need. From time to time he would raise his eyes and meet hers, but quickly look away, as if looking at her was an inconvenience he preferred to avoid. "The house needs repairs," he said suddenly, breaking the silence so abruptly that Helena almost dropped her fork. "You can talk to Donna Marta about anything you need." Thank you," Helena replied, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears, as if it belonged to someone else. "The gardens are neglected too," he continued without looking at her. My first wife liked gardens, but then..." He didn't finish the sentence. He simply stopped talking, as if he had said more than he intended. Helena wanted to ask about her, about the woman who had lived in that house before, who had slept in the room that was now hers, who had sat in that same chair and dined at that same table, but something in Raphael's expression stopped her. There was a pain there, a pain so old and so buried that any question would seem like a violation. Dinner ended in silence, and Raphael stood up, announcing that he would be in his office. Helena remained seated for a few more minutes, staring at the leftover food on her plate, trying to gather courage for what was to come, the wedding night. He climbed the stairs, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples. He entered his room and found a white nightgown spread out on the bed, probably left there by Donna Marta. It was a delicate garment with lace on the sleeves and neckline, and Helena put it on with trembling fingers, feeling ridiculous and exposed. He sat on the edge of the bed and waited. The minutes dragged on, each one longer than the last. Helena heard the sounds of the house, the distant crackling of the fireplace, footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing. But none of these sounds approached her room. No footsteps stopped before her door. An hour passed, then 2. Helena remained motionless, her hands crossed in her lap, her eyes fixed on the door that wouldn't open. Humiliation grew inside her like a silent tide, filling every empty space in her chest. He wouldn't come. He didn't want to come. She was so undesirable, so insignificant, that not even her husband could bear the thought of touching her. When the clock struck midnight, Helena finally lay down and pulled the covers up to her chin. The tears she had held back all day began to stream silently down her face, soaking the strange pillow that smelled of lavender and abandonment. He fell asleep without realizing it, and his dreams were filled with empty corridors and doors that never opened. The days that followed established a routine that Helena learned to navigate in silence. Raphael would leave early to tend to the land and return only for meals, where they exchanged minimal words about practical matters, the weather, the harvest, necessary repairs. He never asked about her thoughts, her desires, her life before marriage. It was as if Helena were just another piece of furniture in that house, something that was there because it needed to be, but that didn't deserve attention. She began to fill her time with small tasks. First, she asked Donna Marta for permission to reorganize the pantry, which was in complete disarray. Then, she ventured into the library, discovering that, contrary to appearances, the books had been read many times, their spines worn from use. She found notes in the margins of some volumes, an elegant handwriting she didn't recognize, and kept that discovery to herself as a small treasure. The garden, however, was what attracted her the most. It had been neglected for years, that much was clear. The flower beds that must once have been tended to were now overflowing with weeds, and the rose bushes were so tangled that it was impossible to distinguish one from another. But there was something there, beneath all that neglect, that Helena could see. A potential, a beauty waiting to be revealed. She began working in the garden during the hottest hours of the day, when no one was around to see her. She wore an old dress and a straw hat she found in a corner of the pantry, and spent hours pulling weeds, pruning dead branches, trying to restore some order to that green chaos. The servants watched her with barely disguised curiosity. The new lady of the house, kneeling on the ground, her fingernails dirty and her face flushed from the sun. This was not how a rich man's wife should behave, but Helena didn't care. The garden was the only thing in that house that seemed to need her, that responded to her care, that changed thanks to her presence. One afternoon, while trying to untangle the branches of a particularly unruly rosebush, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and found Raphael standing a few meters away, watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "What are you doing?" he asked, and there was something in his voice that wasn't exactly anger, but it wasn't approval either. "Taking care of the garden," Helena replied, feeling her face flush. "It was very neglected. I thought I had ordered that no one touch this garden," he interrupted, and this time the harshness in his voice was unmistakable. Helena stood up, wiping her hands on her soiled dress. "I didn't know. Nobody told me. I'm sorry. Don't touch it again," Raphael said, and turned to leave, but stopped after a few steps. And when he spoke again, his voice was lower, almost a whisper. That garden was hers. He didn't need to say whose. Helen understood, and for the first time, she felt something beyond humiliation and loneliness. She felt a pang of compassion for that man who carried a pain she couldn't imagine. But he didn't touch the garden again, at least not during the day. At night, when the house was quiet and everyone was asleep, Helena would sometimes sit by her bedroom window and gaze at the abandoned flower beds, illuminated by the moon. She imagined what they must have been like when they were in bloom, when they were cared for by loving hands, when they were part of a life that wasn't her own. She imagined her first wife kneeling where she had been, planting seeds, watering sprouts, conversing with the flowers as if they could answer. What could have happened to her? What made her give up everything, including the garden she clearly loved? Weeks turned into months, and Helena's life in that house became a sequence of solitary routines. She learned to navigate Raphael's moods, which ranged from polished coldness to an even more icy silence. She learned which rooms he preferred to avoid, which corridors she shouldn't cross, which questions she should never ask. He also learned to recognize the signs of his own invisibility, the way the staff treated her with formal courtesy, but without affection, the way visitors looked right through her, as if she were made of glass, the way her own husband could go days without uttering a single word to her that wasn't strictly necessary. It was like living inside a dream where she screamed but no sound came out of her mouth. One night, Helena couldn't sleep. She went downstairs silently, intending to go to the kitchen to get a glass of water, when she saw a light escaping from under the library door. She hesitated for a moment, knowing she should go back to her room, but something pushed her towards that door. He opened it slowly, expecting to find an employee, but found Raphael instead. He was sitting in an armchair in front of the unlit fireplace, a glass of something amber in his hands, his eyes fixed on a point Helena couldn't see. She didn't notice his presence immediately, and she had the chance to observe him without being observed. There was something different about his face at that hour of the night when he thought no one was watching. The hard lines of his expression were softened, and Helena could see, for the first time, the deep weariness he carried. It wasn't just physical fatigue. It was something more, something that seemed to suck the life out of him with every breath. He looked like a defeated man, a man who had given up fighting whatever was tormenting him. Helena made a retreat to silently retrace her steps, but the floorboard creaked beneath her feet. Raphael looked up immediately, and for a second before his mask of coldness returned, she saw surprise in his gaze, and perhaps something more, vulnerability. "What do you want?" he asked, and the harshness of his voice contrasted sharply with what she had just seen. "I couldn't sleep," said Helena, crossing her arms over her chest, aware that she was only wearing her nightgown. "I saw the light and thought..." "And what were you thinking?" He stood up, setting the glass down on the table beside the armchair. "Were you thinking of spying on me? Of uncovering the secrets of the mysterious widower?" The accusation was so unjust that Helena felt tears welling up in her eyes before she could stop them. "No," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to keep it steady. I just... She didn't finish. She couldn't. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Wait!" Helena stood motionless, her back to him, waiting. "I shouldn't have said that," Raphael continued, and there was something in his tone that bordered on an apology. "You don't deserve this. I haven't been fair to you." She turned slowly. He was closer now, only a few steps between them, and the dim candlelight cast strange shadows on her face. "You didn't want me," Helena said, the words coming out before she could stop them. You didn't want this marriage. You didn't want any wife. And now you're stuck with me, and I'm stuck here, and neither of us knows how to get out of this. The silence that followed was the longest she had ever experienced. Raphael looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time, as if she had said something he never expected to hear. You're right, he said finally. I didn't want this marriage, but it's not because of you. Then why? He looked away, staring at the extinguished fireplace as if he could find the answers among the cold ashes. Why shouldn't I be entitled to another chance? Not after what happened. Helena waited, not daring to breathe. It was more than he had said in all the months since their wedding. My first wife, he continued, each word seeming torn from some painful place within him, didn't throw herself off the roof. She didn't die of illness. She died because I wasn't able to save her. Because I was too busy, too absent, too blind to see what was happening right before my eyes. What happened? Helena asked, so quietly that she could barely hear her own voice. Raphael closed his eyes. She was unhappy. I knew she was unhappy, but I thought it was something temporary, something that would disappear on its own if I gave it enough time. I didn't pay attention. I didn't ask. I didn't see her. And one day she simply stopped fighting. Was it an illness? Helena ventured. In a way. He opened his eyes and looked at her. She had a sadness inside her that consumed everything. The doctors called it melancholy, but it was more than that. It was as if she were drowning in broad daylight, and I was right there beside her, looking the other way. Helena felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. You couldn't have saved someone who didn't want to be saved? Or I could have tried, he said, and the anger in his voice was directed at himself, not at her. I could have paid attention. I could have been a better husband, a better person. But I was too busy building an empire she never wanted, accumulating land she never asked for, being the man my father expected me to be. And when I finally really looked at her, it was too late. Silence fell over them again, but it was different now. There was something shared in that silence, an understanding that hadn't existed before. And now you punish yourself, Helena said, finally understanding. That's why you didn't come to my room on our wedding night. That's why you can barely look at me. It's not because I'm not enough. It's because you think you don't deserve me. Raphael didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. Helena took a step toward him, then another. She stopped just inches from him, so close she could feel the warmth of his body, the smell of whiskey on his breath. I am not her, Helena said, her voice firm despite the tears. I am not your first wife, and I never will be. I'm not trying to replace you, and I don't want you to see me as a second chance or a redemption. But I am here. I am here, and I am alive, and perhaps we can at least be companions to each other. Perhaps we don't need to be enemies in this prison they built for us. He looked at her for a long moment, and Helena saw something change in his eyes. The armor he wore to keep the world at bay had developed a tiny crack, an opening through which something human had managed to escape. You deserved a better husband, he said, someone who could love you the way you deserve to be loved. Perhaps, Helena agreed, but you're the husband I have, and perhaps you deserve a wife who understands you better. But I am the wife you have. We can spend the rest of our lives lamenting what isn't, or we can try to build something with what we have. Raphael reached out and touched her face, wiping away a tear with his thumb. The gesture was so unexpected, so full of a tenderness she hadn't anticipated from him, that Helena closed her eyes and felt more tears escape. I don't know if I can, he admitted. I don't know if I have anything to offer besides an empty house and a broken heart. Then let me try, Helena said, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. Let me tend the garden. Let me bring some life to this house. Let me be seen, at least by you. That's all I ask. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. A lingering kiss that felt like both a plea for forgiveness and a promise. When he pulled away, there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The garden is yours, he said. Do with it what you will. Helena smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she had given since arriving at that house. It wasn't much. It wasn't a fairy tale romance. It wasn't the love she had always dreamed of. But it was a start. And beginnings, she was learning, were more precious than happy endings. The months that followed brought subtle changes, almost imperceptible to an outsider. Raphael was still quiet, still spent long hours in his office, still carried the weight of a past he couldn't let go of. But now, sometimes, he would appear in the garden while Helena worked. He said nothing, just stood there, watching her untangle roots and plant new seedlings. And Helena gradually discovered who the man behind the ice mask really was. She discovered that he liked to read poetry, but only when he thought no one was watching. She discovered that he knew the name of every worker on his land and that he secretly helped the neediest families without ever accepting thanks. She discovered that he was afraid of storms, not because of the thunder, but because his wife had died on a stormy night, and each lightning bolt brought back memories he preferred to forget. She also discovered things about herself. She discovered she was stronger than she thought, capable of building a life from the rubble she had received. She discovered she had a genuine talent for making things grow, not just plants, but also friendships with employees, who gradually began to treat her with true affection. She discovered that her invisibility was not a sentence, only a temporary condition that she had the power to change. The garden flourished under her care. Where before there had only been weeds and dead branches, now grew vibrant rose bushes, white lilies, and yellow daisies that looked like little suns. Helena spent hours there, talking to the plants as if they were old friends, and sometimes, when she thought no one was listening, she would softly sing songs that her grandmother had taught her when she was a child. One afternoon, while pruning a particularly stubborn rose bush, she sensed a presence behind her. She turned around expecting to find Donna Marta, but instead found Raphael. He was holding a teacup and looking at her with an expression she was still learning to decipher. "I brought this for you," he said, extending the cup. "Mrs. Marta said you've been here since dawn." Helena accepted the tea with her hands dirty with soil, and Raphael didn't seem to mind. He sat on a nearby stone bench, one that Helena had restored the previous week, and stayed there while she drank. "It's getting beautiful," he said, looking around. "The garden, it's becoming alive." "Thank you." Helena smiled, wiping the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. "There's still a lot of work to do, but I enjoy it. I like seeing things grow." Raphael was silent for a moment, then said something she didn't expect. "She would have liked you." Helena felt her heart clench. "Your wife?" "Clara." It was the first time he had pronounced her name in Helena's presence. "Yes, she would have liked you. How you don't give up. How you find beauty in abandoned things." "You loved her very much," Helena said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "I loved her." Raphael looked at his own hands. "I still love her, in a way. But I'm learning that loving someone who's gone doesn't mean you can't love someone who's alive. That being with a new person isn't betraying the memory of the one who's gone." Helena didn't know what to say. She sat down beside him on the bench, still holding her teacup. And they stayed there in silence for a long time, looking at the garden she had brought back to life. It was Raphael who broke the silence. "I'm not yet able to be the husband you deserve, but I'd like to try, if you'll let me." Helena felt tears welling up again, but this time they were tears of something that resembled hope. "I would like that," she said. "Very much." He took her hand dirty with earth and sap, and held it as if it were something precious. They didn't kiss, they didn't exchange vows of eternal love, they didn't do any of the things fairy tales promised. But there, in that reborn garden, something began to grow between them, something fragile and hesitant, like a newly planted seedling, but something real. The change didn't happen overnight. There were setbacks, moments when Raphael withdrew into himself again, days when Helena felt that all her efforts had been in vain. There were arguments, heavy silences, nights when each stayed in their own room, each with their own ghosts. But there were also advances. Dinners where the conversation flowed naturally without awkward pauses. Strolls through the gardens at dusk, hands that met almost by chance. Mornings when Helena woke up and found a fresh flower on her bedside table, left there while she slept. And then came the night when Raphael finally knocked on his bedroom door. Helen was reading when she heard the soft knock. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it, but then she heard it again. She stood up, her heart racing, and opened the door. Raphael was there, still dressed in the clothes from the day, his hair slightly disheveled as if he had run his hand through it several times. There was a vulnerability in his gaze that she rarely saw. "May I come in?" he asked. Helena opened the door wider and stepped aside to let him in. He entered and stood in the middle of the room, looking strangely lost in what should have been a familiar space. "I should have come sooner," he said, without looking at her. "On our wedding night. I should have—" "It wasn't necessary," Helena interrupted gently. "I understand now why you didn't come." "No." He finally looked at her. "You don't understand. I didn't come because I was afraid. Not of you, but of myself. Of starting something I didn't know if I could finish. Of hurting yet another person with my inability to be present." Helena approached him, stopping just inches away. "And now? Are you still afraid?" "Terrified," he admitted. And there was a trace of something that could almost have been a smile on his lips. "But I think I'm more afraid of going on without you than of trying to be with you." She raised her hand and touched his face, feeling his stubble scratch her palm. "Then stay." That night, for the first time, they didn't sleep in separate rooms. There was nothing dramatic, nothing like the stories Helena had read in hidden novels. There were only two bodies finding their place side by side, breaths that gradually synchronized, hands that intertwined in the darkness. There was tenderness where Helena expected indifference. There was care where there might have been only obligation. There were lingering glances and silent questions and equally silent answers that were more eloquent than any words. When the sun rose, Helena woke with her head resting on Raphael's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. He was still asleep, his face more relaxed than she had ever seen it, the lines of worry softened by sleep. She stood there, motionless, afraid to move and break the moment. She thought about everything she had faced to get there, the forced marriage, the months of loneliness, the silent rejection, the slow process of building something from nothing. None of it was how she had imagined her life. But perhaps, she thought, the best lives were precisely those we couldn't imagine. Raphael stirred and opened his eyes, meeting hers immediately. For a moment, there was confusion in his gaze, as if he didn't know where he was. But then the memory of the previous night seemed to return, and something softened in his expression. "Good morning," he said, his voice hoarse with sleep. "Good morning," Helena replied. They stayed there a while longer with no hurry to get up, no urgent obligations calling them. Outside, the sun rose over the flowery garden, casting golden rays through the curtains. Somewhere in the house, Donna Marta was already beginning her chores, and the muffled sounds of the morning routine reached them. "I dreamt about her," Raphael said suddenly, and Helena knew immediately who he was talking about. "I dreamt that she was in the garden, picking roses, and when she saw me, she smiled. She wasn't sad, she wasn't blaming me. She was just at peace." Helena squeezed his hand. "Perhaps she is. Maybe." He sighed. "I don't think I'll ever stop carrying her with me. She's become part of who I am." "I wouldn't expect anything different," Helena said. "Just as you wouldn't expect me to forget who I was before coming here. We are made up of all the people we love, all the pain we feel, all the gardens we cultivate." Raphael turned to face her, and there was something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. It wasn't love. Not yet. Not completely. But it was something close. Something that promised that love could come, if they gave it enough time, if they were patient enough. "How did you become like this?" he asked. "So wise? So capable of forgiveness?" Helena smiled, but there was an old sadness behind that smile. "I'm not wise. I'm just someone who's spent her whole life being ignored and has learned to observe. And there's nothing to forgive, Raphael. You didn't hurt me on purpose. You were just trying to survive your own pain, just as I was trying to survive mine." He kissed her forehead, a lingering kiss that felt like a promise. "I'll try to be better," he said against her skin. "Every day, I'll try. And on the days when I can't, I'll be here," Helena replied. "Just as I hope you'll be here on the days when I can't." The months continued to pass, and the house on the hill slowly transformed. It was no longer a monument to endless grief. It was a home, imperfect and under construction, but a home nonetheless. Helena hired more gardeners to help her, and together they expanded the garden beyond what she had initially planned. There was now an orchard in the back, with apple and pear trees that promised fruit for the following summer. There was a small pond where colorful carps swam in lazy circles. Benches were scattered along the stone paths, inviting visitors to sit and appreciate the surrounding beauty. Raphael began spending less time in his office and more time with Helena. They developed their own rituals. Tea in the garden every afternoon, walks through the fields at dusk, shared readings by the fireplace. He began to tell stories about his childhood, about Clara, about the dreams he had before life taught him that dreams don't always come true. And Helena told stories about her own life, about the father she lost too soon, about the mother who never knew how to love her, about the years of invisibility that shaped her into who she was. It wasn't a perfect marriage. There were difficult days, arguments, moments of frustration on both sides. Raphael still withdrew at times, and Helena still struggled with the feeling of not being enough. But now they faced these difficulties together, as allies instead of strangers. A year after their wedding, on a spring morning, Helena woke up feeling nauseous and rushed to the bathroom before Raphael could ask what was wrong. When she returned to the room, he was sitting on the bed, his eyes filled with worry. "Are you okay?" he asked. Helena sat down beside him, her heart pounding. She had suspected it a few weeks ago, but hadn't wanted to say anything until she was sure. Now, however, there was no denying it. "I think I'm pregnant," she said. The silence that followed was unlike any silence they had shared before. Helena observed Raphael's face, expecting to see fear, hesitation, perhaps even rejection. But what she saw surprised her, a pure and absolute joy that lit up his eyes like she had never seen before. "Really?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "True." He hugged her with an intensity that left her breathless, and when he pulled away, tears welled in his eyes. "I thought I never... After everything, I didn't think I deserved it." "You deserve it," Helena said, cupping his face in her hands. "You deserve happiness, Raphael. You deserve a family. You deserve a second chance." "You gave me this," he said. "You gave me all of this. I don't know how to thank you. So don't thank me. Just stay. Just keep trying. Just love me. Even if it's little by little, even if it's slowly. I already love you," he said, and it was the first time those words had come from his lips since they met. I love you, Helena. I don't know when it started, I don't know how it happened, but I love you. Helena cried. She cried for all the months of loneliness, for all the nights she thought she would never be loved, for all the moments she doubted her own worth. But she also cried tears of joy, of relief, of gratitude for being alive to experience that moment. I love you too, she said between sobs, even when you were impossible, even when I thought you'd never see me. I loved you anyway. They stayed embraced for a long time, while the morning sun streamed through the window and bathed the room in golden light. Outside, the garden awaited, full of flowers that Helena had planted, full of life that she had cultivated from neglect. 9 months later, on a winter night, a baby girl was born. They named her Clara, in honor of the woman who had come before, the woman whose garden Helena had brought back to life. Little Clara had her father's dark eyes and her mother's brown hair, and when she cried, the sound echoed through the corridors of the stone house, as an affirmation that there, where before there had been only silence and mourning, now there was life. Raphael held his daughter for the first time with an almost religious reverence, as if he couldn't believe that something so small and perfect could be real. Helena watched him from the bed, exhausted but incredibly happy, and thought that this moment made up for all the difficult moments that had led up to it. She's beautiful, Raphael whispered without taking his eyes off the baby. Yes, it is, Helena agreed, and it's ours. Ours! He repeated the word as if he were savoring its taste. Our family. In the years that followed, the house on the hilltop was completely transformed. It was no longer known as the place of the Ice Widower. It was known as the place of the Montenegros, the family that had the most beautiful garden in the region, where the lady of the house still worked on her knees in the soil even though she was rich, where the master of the house could be seen every afternoon walking hand in hand with his wife along the flowery paths. Clara grew up surrounded by love, running through the gardens her mother had created, listening to stories about the other Clara who had come before her. Raphael and Helena had 2 more children, a boy who inherited his father's seriousness, and a girl who inherited her mother's joy. And the house was filled with laughter and mess and everything a home should have. There were still difficult moments, as there always are. Raphael still battled his demons at times, and Helena still felt invisible on certain days. But now they had each other. They had a family. They had a garden that bloomed every spring as proof that abandoned things could be reborn. One autumn afternoon, many years after that wedding night, when Helena waited in vain for a husband who never came, she was sitting on the stone bench in the garden when Raphael joined her. His hair already had gray strands and her face already showed the lines of time, but when their eyes met, there was still something there, something that had been born slowly but had become unshakable. What are you thinking about? He asked, sitting down next to her. I was thinking about how I got here, Helena said, about how hopeless everything seemed that first day, about how I thought my life was over before it even began. And now? Helena looked around. At the garden she had built flower by flower, at the house that had become her home, at the children playing in the distance, at the man who had learned to love her. Now, she said, smiling, now I think my life is only halfway through, and I can't wait to see what comes next. Raphael held her hand, the same hand that had once been dirty with soil when he finally saw her for real. Whatever happens, he said, we'll face it together. And so they did. In that house high on the hill, surrounded by flourishing gardens, a woman who had married against her will found something she never expected to find. Not just love, though love was there. Not just family, though family was there, but something deeper. The certainty that she had been seen, that she had been chosen, that her worth hidden for so long had finally been recognized. And in the garden she had rescued from neglect, the roses continued to bloom, year after year, generation after generation, as silent witnesses that life, like love, always finds a way to be reborn.